Okay, everyone, Shalom, March 24th, 2025. We are doing Parshat Vayakhel I'm sorry, Parshat Pekudei. And this is the last Parsha of the book of Shmot. An important Parsha just for that reason alone, uh, but because it has a lot of summary information about what we've been dealing with over the last several weeks, namely the construction of the Mishkan and how the Torah devotes so much space to that, and I think also in a way to try and capture the mood of the final construction of the Mishkan, or the moment that the Mishkan sanctuary is uh, put up. Um, and what I want to do here is focus on a specific question, but really it's a larger question since the we're given a timestamp. The Torah gives us an actual timestamp of the Mishkan and when it was finally erected and what that means. And I'm going to put that in the context of timestamp and telling time. And it's a an important theme, and I return to this theme a lot because it's how we frame our experience in life. We are always marking time. I'll give you a few examples of that um, at the very outset. So, for example, here in the we are, it's important for us to to show this. This is the Bring Them Home Now website. This is the hostage website. So here we are, 535 days, 6 hours, 13 minutes, 22 seconds. I mean, this is a clock of captivity of the hostages, and it's important to try to wrap our mind around this. We don't think after a certain number of days, we don't think in terms of days anymore. We're 535 days, which is a year and, 170 or so days, which is close to a year and a half. Um, and even that is impossible to to frame in terms of what does it mean to be in captivity for that time. Um, it's a kind of sphira that we're doing, and it means that and I put this as an example. Of course, we're living with this. Uh, we we're always setting the clock in our minds. We're always setting a clock based on certain events. Um, a while ago, I used to talk about how many years, how many days, how many months since our fire, right? In August of 2006. And marking special yort sites. And so every human life has its, overlapping clocks. And there is not one single clock, especially for Jews, right? So today may be the 24th day of March, but it's also the 24th day of Adar, of Adar, which means that, as you know, we are heading into Nisan. That's going to be on Sunday. Sunday is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and of course Pesach. And so, we calibrate our lives based around a calendar, based around a day, based around certain important days, certain important dates personally, certain important dates collectively, whether they are collectively to communities, collective to different, groups, nations. I want to put for your consideration the whole notion of this the trope of 100 days. 100 days is something that you are going to hear more of, I suppose, as we mark 100 days. Or are we are no, we're not in. We have not yet marked 100 days of the new presidency. But even that construct of time, that is So I'm going to just ask you for a quiz here. When do you think that category of 100 days originated in American political life? Who would suggest?
FDR.
Very good. Okay, John, good. You get the little prize today. I have um, a, uh, a website with regard to that, but I'm just gonna put this up for you just to illustrate that uh, he spoke about this in the July 24, 1933 fireside, his third fireside chat, which evidently is not recorded, which is too bad. A lot of his chats are recorded and on the FDR presidential, or it's a website of presidential speeches. And here's just the first paragraph. So July 24th, 1933. This is well, he would have been inaugurated in January of 1933. So this is already 180 or so days. After the adjournment of the historical special session of the Congress 5 weeks ago, I purposely refrained from addressing you for two very good reasons. First, I think that we all wanted the opportunity of a little quiet thought to examine and assimilate in a mental picture the crowding events of the 100 days which had been devoted to the starting of the wheels of the New Deal. Secondly, I wanted a few weeks in which to set up the new minister organization and to see the first fruits of our careful planning. So he is the first president uh, on record, I think, to talk about 100 days, and a 100 days is not a the a normal kind of frame of time. I mean, until that time, nobody spoke about 100 days. Um, there is a reference of Napoleon, which I'll put up in a second, that also has. But Ruth, let me ask you for your question. Go ahead.
No, Larry's listening. He's pointing out to me, Mr. Historian, that back then the inauguration was in March.
Ah,
Not
okay.
okay.
Sorry.
So
Thank
when
you.
you're saying it was 180 days, it really probably was
It
100 days.
probably was 100 days
Yeah,
then. Thank you for the clarification.
sure.
Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, so here we have um, David Greenberg, historian, Rutgers University, very important historian of American history. And he has an essay on this very subject. It's also posted on the site of the presidential speeches. The 100 days term originally came from Napoleon's time when he escaped his exile, rallied the French army, and briefly retook power until he was defeated at Waterloo. To be sure, the 100 Days mythology will die hard. The term has a long history, originally came not from Roosevelt's time, but from Napoleon's. In 1815, the exiled conqueror escaped from his redoubt on the island of Elba, rallied the French army, briefly restored his rule until his defeat at Waterloo. Technically, all of this took 111 days to unfold, but the period came to be called the 100 Days, a period of dramatic accomplishment and transformation. It was after the 1933 that the term entered the widespread American usage, etc., etc., etc. So it's a trope. You see that I have here. We also count years. Now, um, this peroration at the beginning of the Gettysburg Address is, I'm guessing, the most famous peroration, the most famous way that of of um, talking about years in the American canon, as it were, 4 score and 7 years ago. And he used that phrase most likely because he was a Bible person. He loved the Bible. He loved to read the Bible, and the Bible, the King James version of the Bible especially, had tremendous impact on the way English was spoken, especially English oratory. And you know the this little phrase, which makes it memorable and poetic, also has a certain kind of oratorical trick. The oratorical trick is even if you are uh, if even if you were one of the people standing at the cemetery in Gettysburg as he spoke that, you would have had to do an immediate calculation in your head to go from fourscore and seven to 87 to what year is it now? It's 1863. 1863 minus 87 is 1776. Ah, I get it, right? So that happens in the space of milliseconds, of course, if you have the math. Um, but what it does is it kind of shapes you, and it shapes an era. And I think, by everyone's estimation, the genius and the absolute genius of that speech was in the space of a couple of minutes, he was able to put a marker in time. He said that was an era, and up the fourscore and 7 years up until this point defines one era. Now we're moving forward. We're giving the country a new birth of freedom. Um, and and it's in understanding time and understanding how to tell time and how time is kind of organized around these pivotal events that we get ideas and we shape the way we live our lives. I don't know if any of you have a kind of reaction to that thesis. That's my thesis here, and I'm going to show how it is read into this story here. Okay. I don't know how anybody else reacts to the when you learn the Gettysburg Address as a young, you probably learned it in what, fifth grade, sixth grade, whatever you learned these things. Did you learn it in any context of math or any context of arithmetic or any of time? No. All right. So let me go to what I want to go to, which is a couple of things here. Okay. So you have in the Bible, you have a lot of places where there are uh, calendars. I think the first calendar, of course, is creation, which is a 7-day calendar. But in the creation calendar, we get a sense of years only at the end. But in terms of, a story telling itself out, I wanted to point first to the Noah calendar. So this is the Noah flood story. I simply went to Chat. I mean, I could do this. It would take me 2 hours to do this and chart it, but ChatGPT did it in 2 seconds. Um, so in the story, we talk about Noah being 600, and then it says the second month, the 10th day, and then it's 7 days before the flood. And the second month, the 17th day, the flood starts. On the third month, the 27th day, that's 40 days, the flood stops, the rain stops. The seventh month, the 17th day, Mount Ararat. 10th month, first day, mountaintops become visible. Um, 40 days, Noah sends out a raven. 7 days later, Noah sends out the dove. 7 more days, 7 more days. The first month of the first day, he is 601 years old. At age 601, second month, 27th day, Noah leaves the ark. So the duration is approximately 1 year and 10 days. That's the whole story. And I think, when we read the story of Noah, we're very attuned to time. Time is elapsing here. And what that story does masterfully as narrative is by telling us time and by giving us timestamps at the various points, when the rain starts, when the rain stops, when the how long the boat is on the water, when the boat lands, etc. The effect of that, I think, is very powerful because it says we have to imagine ourselves in going through a whole year. That I think is the remarkable effect of a time stamped story that we always ask, well, where were we at this point in the previous year? To a certain extent, by telling time on the war of October 7th, we are also, reflecting. We're saying, it's another Pesach now. We're hitting another Pesach in this war. This is the longest war. This is the most difficult war. Um, what I've been reviewing material that we put out last year for Pesach, and part of it is astonishing in terms of that's where we were. From last year to this year, etc. And we talk that way in religious language. Yom Kippur, mi Yom Kippurim zeh ad Yom Kippurim ba, or mi Yom Kippurim shavar ad Yom Kippurim zeh, from last year to this year, from this year to next year. And the understanding is that we know that we lots of things happen in a year. Your life can change in a year, and don't we all know that? Don't we all know that your life can turn so quickly from last year to this year, from this year to next year? That's just a feature of being a human being, right? And we could spend a lot of time, each of us, talking about all the different things that we have experienced and how we've grown or changed, or things become part of our lives over the course of time. Go on. So that's the biblical calendar. Esther, we just read, also has a calendar to it. We don't need to go into that, but Esther is a time-stamped book. Bishnat Shalosh L'Malacho, in the third year of his reign, he had a 6-month feast. In the first month, this is something that's overlooked often in the teaching of Esther. The first month, 13th day, Haman issues a decree to destroy the Jews. Well, what holiday occurs on the 14th day of the first month? It's Pesach. So we never really pay attention, and the book doesn't draw our attention to this in any overt way, that she starts fasting. Mordecai and the Jews begin fasting on the 14th day of the first month on Pesach, which is so strange. Mordecai issues the counter decree, the 12th month, the 13th day, the massacre, 14th day, the celebration, etc., and the 12th month for all time and subsequent years. So the Book of Esther is a calendared book. It's a book that has a timestamp. Okay, and we can go that. Now here's the Exodus timeline. So what happened? B'chodesh harishon basara lachodesh. You take on the 10th day of the first month. Each household is to select a Passover lamb. Uh, and on the 14th day, you're to sacrifice that. I often wonder, when I think about that, you are to take a lamb on the 10th day, um, and there is a comment in this in some scholarship that the 10th uh, day of the month, interesting that the 10th day of the first month and the 10th day of the seventh month are very interesting days. The 10th day of the first month, of course, is everybody take your lamb day. Okay. Everybody, it's lamb designation day, sheep designation day. Okay. And the 10th day of the seventh month is fast because your fate is being determined day. It's Yom Kippur. Um, do we have any other important moments on the 10th day? And does the 10th day correspond to anything important in the lunar cycle? I don't think so. Um, the 14th day, certainly the 15th day, is the midpoint of the lunar cycle, the full moon. That would be something significant. But why the 10th day? I'm not sure. But the Torah does demarcate it for us and tells us that this was to happen as a way of, the month is going to be special. It's your month. Just pay attention to this. It's your month. The first month is your month. And on the 10th day of your month, which is the month of liberation, you will take this lamb because you're going to prepare it. Um, so, sacrifice, the plague of the firstborn on the 15th day. So, I have done a moment to moment, hour by hour chronology of that first night. I believe, I'm a minority opinion among my colleagues, that um, at midnight, which is the astronomical midnight, the plague of the firstborn is happening, and they still had not yet had their meal. It was roasting. And that is the point where Pharaoh ejects the Israelites. They leave, they take their dough, they take their unleavened dough, unbaked, wrap it in their kneading bowls, in their cloaks, and they depart Egypt and they move throughout the night to their next spot. So over the course of the next several hours, they're leaving Egypt with hunger, and they don't bake their matzahs till several hours later, probably at sunrise of the next day. Um, and so they're leaving on an empty stomach. I think the 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 symbolism of that I think is very powerful, which is that the day before Passover, which was intended to be a feast and a preparatory moment, ends up becoming a fast, and the fast ends up becoming a kind of renewal experience, and that's the way I read that story. Others disagree with me on that. By the seventh, by the 21st day, according to both the traditional account, it's not time stamped in the Torah. I don't think it is. Uh, we have the crossing of the Red Sea. We commemorate the splitting of the Red Sea on the seventh day of Pesach, which is the 21st day of the month, the first month. And then we have nothing else except the arrival in the wilderness of Sin on the beginning of the manna on the 15th day of the second month. And then Mount Sinai, the third month, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. These are traditional timestamps. There are, of course, debates about many of these things. The golden calf incident happens on the 17th day of Tammuz. Moses goes up for the third time, seventh, and then he comes down on the 10th day of the seventh month. He returns with the new tablets, which is why in religious terms, the 10th day of the seventh month is Yom Kippur. It's the day of atonement, the day when you can reset everything. And that's the day that that biblically, in the biblical chronology as traditionally understood, that's the day that Moses comes down with the second set of tablets. And that for all time will become the day for Jews to experience their renewal. And here we are, the first month of in the Nisan in the year two. The tabernacle is erected. That's Exodus chapter 40, verse 17. And I'm going to go on to all the ways that the story is kind of really very confusing. But this day is time stamped, and this is in our parsha. Uh, I'm going to just skip here. This is the Nisan chart. The first, take the sheep, 10th day, slaughter the sheep, midnight, Sukkot to Ramses, 21st of the Red Sea. And here's our parsha. B'yom HaChodesh HaRishon, Be'echad LaChodesh, Takim Mishkan Oel Moed. On the first day of the month, on day one of the month, you are to erect the dwelling, the tent of appointment. Okay, so just look at that verse for a second. First day of the month, on the day one of the month, it should say Bayom HaChodesh Harishon, on the first day of the month, it should say the first day of the first month. I'm sorry, okay, of the first month. Thank you. The first day of the first month, on the first of the day of the first month, you are to erect the dwelling, the tent of appointment. Okay, so I'm going to just pitch a very slow pitch softball here, pitch, which is you be the rabbi, okay? You be the interpreter, and you say, very interesting. The Exodus happens in the first month, and the sanctuary is erected on the first day of the first month. Discuss. What is the connection between the Exodus and the sanctuary? What's going on here? What could be the symbolism? Go ahead, Nanette.
The newness, you know, the Exodus is new, The sanctuary is new. The newness.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. This is this is like saying, okay, this is the first anniversary of the Exodus. So we are layering on top of the Exodus another layer of meaning, or more broadly, the month of the Exodus, which is the month of redemption, now has layered on top of it the month of, I'm not going to call it the dedication, although the dedication of the sanctuary is going to take place there. It's the month where we're all set. We're set up. Just give me 1 second more, which is part of what is so interesting about this parsha, and many people will see it as a kind of, it's redundant and it's boring and it's all these details and lots of, little kinds of details. What's interesting about it is that everything gets put together, everything is completed. In my conversation with my colleagues about this, I talked about the joy that I had as a kid when, all of us as kids, and I would maybe genderize it by saying as young boys, we like to do models. We like to, put things together. The model car, the model airplane, the balsa wood, whatever, all that. It's just a lot of fun to do. And there is a great sense of accomplishment when, as a little kid, you finally put it all together and it's done. And you look at it and you go, look what I made. Look what I was able to assemble. The notion of assembly is a very satisfying thing. It's satisfying to a young kid when a young kid puts together a model airplane or model car, and it's satisfying to older people, professionals, when they assemble buildings, houses, homes, or things that require assembly. Uh, I would make an exception for IKEA furniture because I find that to be excessively frustrating. But go ahead, Susie. Go ahead. Unmute.
Um, so if it's the purpose. So the Mishkan is the it being on the same day. It's the purpose of what the freedom was all about. Rabbi Hilsenrath taught us that it's not freedom from, but freedom for. So the Mishkan is the symbol of what's coming next, and the Torah, and the way we construct our lives, and
Sure. Sure, and I mean that's just that's one set of vocabulary for an idea of on top of redemption is the layering of responsibility and the layering of Torah, right? And that this is a uniquely um, personal and collective experience. Marlene, go ahead.
Well, God said, if you build it, then I'll live with you. So he's giving them a place. And it's a reminder after some time when they've had a chance to have the freedom uh, set in that they'll concretize their places with meeting God.
And yes, exactly. And so there's something to be said for, that this is a part of being a liberated people, that God will dwell among you, and that for the people, the the um, the sanctuary is going to become the place where God will make himself known to the people as they march through the desert. And this is an important point, which is, I've redeemed you, right? Anochi, the first commandment. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the house of took of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I redeemed you, and I am the Lord your God who is speaking now, the Lord your God who is revealing to you these commandments. He doesn't say it in those terms, but the revelation of the commandments, which doesn't happen, by the way, in Nisan, but the structure for a continuous revelation is accomplished in Nisan, such that you would think that as the Israelites passed through the desert, they would celebrate the first of the month of Nisan, not only as the month of the day of the first month of redemption, the first of the month of redemption, but today is the anniversary of the setting up of the sanctuary, also, which is going to be, I don't want to use the word co-equal, but I'll just put like that would be a close second to the Exodus. Susie, go ahead.
It's the same
Oh
time
yeah.
schedule that God was saying, take your sheep, and 10 days later, you'll do something with it. You'll build the Mishkan, and then we'll be together.
So when they're doing their sheep, they don't know that there's going to be a Mishkan yet. But you're right. They're soon after the Ten Commandments, if we follow the biblical chronology, there's this whole discussion. I want, as you said, Vasuli Mikdash Shachanti B'tocham. That comes very quickly after the Ten Commandments. Those words are spoken at Sinai, and so the people have what to anticipate as they are going to go forward. Now, if you're in real time and you're thinking about what you're going to experience, you're going to say, okay, well, we've been promised that we're going to leave Egypt and we're going to go into the land of Israel, which is somewhere not far from here. Okay. And you think that it's going to be a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe a little more, right? Because your parents have told you, yeah, we're going to get into the land of our ancestors, and it's only a few more weeks away. Okay. And then, of course, terrible things happen, including the golden calf, including, what we'll see later on, months from now, the spies, which detains them. That's what keeps them wandering for 40 years. But in the moment that they receive the Torah, and the subsequent moments, they've been told to make a sanctuary. They make the sanctuary, and they dedicate this sanctuary. Sorry, they haven't dedicated it yet, but they have completed its construction on the first day of the first month. Okay, now there are two aspects to that before we get to Susie, which is one aspect is, wow, great moment. We've completed the Mishkan. Second aspect is, what took us so long? When do we get there? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And so I think that tension really emerges in this moment. Susie, go ahead.
So just to expand a little bit on what I said before, so they're let out into the desert, and they're just like, so okay, so you're not wandering around. You have a project to do. You need a project of how you're going to occupy your time before you get where you're going. And these are the people that built Ramses, apparently. So giving you a different kind of building project. This is part of like the re-education of the people. Okay, you're going to build, but you're going to build something entirely different now.
Right. You're going to build not a store city that is stationary, but you're going to build a mobile throne room for God,
A different
and
purpose. Different purpose.
it's a purpose. The purpose is to have this ability to take Sinai with you everywhere. And um, as uh, some scholars point out, just looking for the book, but I can't find it, that the sanctuary is actually very Egyptian in its shape. Uh, the sanctuary resembles the mobile throne room of a pharaoh who goes out to war and sets up a kind of tent, oblong tent, in which there is a palace, a miniature replica of the palace. It's a fascinating uh, uh, discussion on what is being stated here in the Mishkan. The Mishkan is, Judaism, the rabbinic tradition, and 2,000 years of commentary on this has either willfully or not ignored the, the context from which it emerged. And when you kind of reacquaint yourself with the context, it's brilliant that this is making the sanctuary is actually a polemic against Egypt because this is the same shape and the same configuration as a pharaonic throne room, a tented throne room. And here in this version, God, an invisible God with no form, dwells in this tent, but of course dwells everywhere. And the covenant is placed inside this tent as a symbol of where God will meet the people, as opposed to where Pharaoh meets or Pharaoh is alone. And so that I think is a very, very important element here. So we have layered onto it by the date a new meaning. I'll give you just one example of this phenomenon in Jewish life, where a single date has layers and layers and layers upon it, and I'm referring, of course, to Tisha B'av. There are, of course, others where Tisha B'av became a date of calamity on which many, many different calamities, ended up, uh, you know, just being layered on top of layer. The most important of which are the destruction of the first temple and the destruction of the second temple. What a coincidence that the second temple would be destroyed in the same day that the first temple was destroyed. How does that happen? And how is it that in subsequent generations or in historical epochs, the ninth of Av would become days of significance with calamities? Is it an accident, or is it, something that was exploited by Israel's enemies? The Nazis were experts at this. The Nazis understood the Jewish calendar more than any Jewish enemies, and until Hamas, of course, and they exploited these days as days of inverted joyous days, and they also, of course, exploited fast days and the holidays to make them days of calamity. And Hamas, of course, a year and a half ago, did this with Simchat Torah. It was a perfectly exploited opportunity because the people weren't expecting it. It was Shabbat, also a Simchat Torah festival. They understood the Jewish calendar, no question about that, and they understood that this was a time when most people would be with their families, etc. Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur War, which preceded this by 50 years exactly, took advantage of that same feature of Jewish life, that here we're going to take the most solemn day and we're going to make it a catastrophe. And so what has happened, I think, for Jews is that we have become extraordinarily sensitive to our holiday celebrations, to the extent that we know that our enemies will exploit them and invert them to cause massive suffering on these days. Look, part of what happens at Passover, I think, has within it some rituals that have really tried to understand Jewish vulnerability on this day. Um, we look at the Elijah ritual as a ritual of, it's got many, many different layers of meaning to it. But one layer of meaning is that uh, the Passover is a perilous time for Jews. Uh, Jews are in their homes, and Jews are vulnerable. And so by saying Shefoch chamatcha al hagoyim, pour out thy wrath on the nations that do not know you, it is a way of expressing the deepest vulnerability, that here we are in our homes where we are hoping that we are safe, and yet we are very, very vulnerable. And so in Jewish history, the calendar itself has become layered with all sorts of meaning, to the extent that our enemies exploit that. Okay. So that's just the thought on calendar. Now we're going to go on with this because I think it goes to an interesting location. So there is I mean the very granular conversation about the completion of the sanctuary on the first day raises a very interesting problem, because we are going to see, once we get into the book of Leviticus, you recall that there are 7 days of uh, you know rituals culminating in the eighth day. The eighth day is when Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, bring a strange fire and they are killed. And this happens in the dedication. So the question is that on the first day of the month? Did that all happen on the first day, or did it happen on the eighth day of the month? And if it happened on the eighth day of the month, then so many things are happening at the same time, namely also the dedicatory offerings of the 12 tribal chieftains, each tribal chieftain bringing the same set of gifts as the sanctuary is being consecrated. On the eighth day, that is when this horrible thing happens. So it's a really confusing puzzle, and I'm quoting the first three sentences or two sentences in Ibn Ezra here. On the first day, we find the following difference of opinion. Some say that the eighth day of consecration fell on the first day of the month of Nisan. They were forced to say that Moses erected the tabernacle on the 23rd day of Adar. That is, that Moses first erected the tabernacle on the 23rd day of Adar. They were forced to say this because Scripture tells us that special sacrifices were offered during the period of consecration. These sacrifices could not be offered without the tabernacle standing. All right, I've already lost myself on this. Okay, and my point is like this, which is, you know, the Torah, which we are reading, trying to find the timestamps here, is complicated, because the Torah is not telling us its story following these timestamps the same way that we would, like, the best example would be Star Trek, captain's log, star date, da 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 da, where that's the feature of Star Trek is at various points in the episode, you'll get the monologue of the captain giving you the timestamp of what's going on, and things are following consecutively, right? And the Torah doesn't exactly work that way, and that's where we get the idea of ein mukdam muchar b'Torah. We've talked about it in the past, that the Torah, while we want to read it in a chronological way, is not necessarily following a chronology here, a chronological order. There are some things that are in the Torah that are taking place after or before they're narrated. So here we have the dedication or the construction of the Mishkan on the eighth day, which is, we're going to read that in 3 weeks from now, or several weeks from now. We are going to read about the calamity of Nadav and Avihu. Um, is that did that already happen? Is it happening on the first day? Is it happening on the eighth day of the month? Oh, it's a big question. Maybe we'll deal with it another time. So timing, as elegant as we would like it to be, is often very confusing. Okay, but I'm going to set that question aside, and now I'm going to turn to the eighth chapter of First Kings, because in the eighth chapter of First Kings we have this verse that I think will give us some very important insight into the calendar. Az yakel Moshe tziknei Yisrael et kol rashei hamatot. Then Solomon convoked the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes, and the ancestral chieftains of the Israelites before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of God from the city of David, that is Zion. ויקהלו אל המלך שלמה כל איש ישראל בירח האיתנים בחג הוא החודש Shivi'i, the entire body of Israel gathered before King Solomon at the feast of booths in the month of Etanim, that is the seventh month. Okay, so wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to close the screen for a second. We have two great moments of that involve this holy things. One which takes place on the first month, and one which takes place on the seventh month. One which takes place in the time of Moses, and one which takes place in the time of Solomon. One which is the desert, and one which is the kingdom established in the land. One which is the mobile, no capital, and one which is the capital in Jerusalem, with the newly constructed temple, a huge, by any standard, even in Solomon's time, a huge edifice, a big complex, a real important system for the centralization of the people, the cult, the religion, a whole establishment as religion can be at its best, right? I'm saying it, with a kind of cynicism, right? That once you have a building and a priesthood and an establishment and a budget, and you have to make things operate, you want to bring out the best in people, and yet, you have to worry about every single detail. And one of the detail, this is in my imagination, you know, um, the I want to go. I want to be at the meeting. I want the minutes of the meeting when the king and his council decides. So when are we going to dedicate this? We've got to dedicate this temple. We just built the temple. We spent years and years and years, and let's say, anachronistically, billions of dollars building this building, and we got to use it. What's the best time to use it? When are we going to dedicate it? And so they go around the room, okay, and uh, I'll play a pious person and say, but your Highness, uh, the people of Israel were redeemed in Nisan. Nisan is the month of our redemption. Nisan is the month of our freedom, liberation. And of course, the sanctuary was dedicated. The first sanctuary, the Mishkan, was dedicated in Nisan. Therefore, Your Highness, with all due respect, we should dedicate the temple in Nisan. And then the counter opinion would be by someone who is very practical and very wise also. But Your Highness, we have built this magnificent building, and let's face it, uh, in Nisan, which is the early spring, people are in their fields, they're harvesting their wheat, and they are going to be collecting all of their wheat for the next several weeks, following the commandments of the Torah, and they're going to be, doing their first harvests for the barley harvest, and that means that they're all going to observe Passover, they're going to want to run back to their homes quickly so that they can go back to their fields because everything is happening. Here's a better idea, Your Highness. Let's do the dedication when everybody's rested at the end of their harvest season, where everybody's joyfully, naturally joyous, and where they're going to want to come together. And let's face it, there'll be plenty of wine, there'll be plenty of what to drink, they'll be in a good mood. And the public opinion for you will be enhanced by this. If you do it during Nisan, they'll hate you. But if you do it during Sukkot, they'll love you. Okay, so it's a no-brainer for him. He chooses Sukkot. He chooses the seventh month because the seventh month is the month where the natural rhythm of the people in the land is going to be, much more. The agricultural season is complete. The harvest is done. They're celebrating the harvest, and they can go back to their homes after a prolonged period of celebration, which would include plenty of eating, plenty of feasting, and plenty of drinking, and go home. And it's at that point that we could create a solemn gathering that will dedicate this beautiful building and include tremendous generosity of the king, which means free barbecue for everybody, the roasted lamb for everybody, a free meal, okay, and celebration. And I'm not saying it cynically. I truly think that this is there's a certain brilliance here in how to win public opinion. We know this to this very day. What do you do to get people to come to an event? Feed them and give them plenty to drink and make it free. Okay. And here is a big, huge feast that's essentially free. Of course, they paid for it in other ways, but it's free. The king is serving it, and it's a big, big event. And it's happening in the seventh month. So it's going to happen in the seventh month because the seventh month has a different character to it. Now, I said this all cynically, but I'm going to make it theological now. Okay, I'm going to dress it up theologically and actually believe in both opinions. And that's, I think, what makes, I can live very well understanding that there's a deep religious idea here, but there's also a deep practical idea here. Let me put it in my chart here, which is as follows. Okay. So the Mishkan, the first month, is and the Mikdash is the seventh month. Mikdash is the temple, Mishkan is the sanctuary. Chodesh hazeh lachem. This is your month, Israel, your private month. Elamodei Adonai. This is God's time. That's the first verse of the divine calendar. Now, of course, we'll get into a complicated issue in a second. This is the beginning of months, the appointed times of God. The first month is the Passover, the 14th of the month. And this is the way that the calendar is described from the temple's perspective. I'll explain all this in a second. Okay. Here's the point. I enjoy this theme very much. Passover and Nisan is a private Israel-oriented thing. The sanctuary, the Mishkan, is a very intimate structure for Israel. It's a small structure. It's your private, national, particularistic experience of you and God, God and you. The temple is a statement. The temple does not only belong to you, but the temple is, in the first orbit, yours. But the temple, as it is conceived by Solomon, and also in the prophetic vision, the temple is a place for the world. The temple is a place where God meets the world. And all the world can come to the temple. In the vision of Zechariah, that day the Lord's name will be one, Ushmo Echad, and people will come to Jerusalem. It's not that they're all going to be Jewish. It means that if people are going to orient themselves toward Jerusalem and they're going to speak God's name as one, they're going to speak God's name from all of their different places within all of their different particularistic stories and have a universal vision. So it's the particular versus the universal. Nisan is the particular. Tishrei is the universal. Nisan belongs to God and the Jewish people. Tishrei, the seventh month, belongs to God, and the seventh holiday in the seventh month belongs to everyone. Okay? We never talk about it this way, but think about it. I hope I get it right. How many holidays are the first month is the first month, Nisan. Go through the calendar. The seventh month is Tishrei. What are the holidays of Tishrei? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, first day, Sukkot, last day.
Seret.
Sorry, am I getting this wrong? Wait a second. There are 2 days of Yom Kippur, for one day, Sukkot, seventh. the seventh holiday in the seventh month is going to be Shmini, is going to be the eighth day of assembly, I think. Whatever. I have to recheck that. Anyway, the point is that in this in the the no, I'm sorry. The
Oh, I know what you're thinking.
I know what I'm
it's
thinking.
seven,
The seventh
the
holiday
one
is
before
Sukkot.
Shmini Atzeret. My sister was born on it.
All right, I'm gonna have to fix this up
Anyway,
when we edit this the transcript. So here's the point. The point is that this day the Mishkan is
oh,
private.
Hoshana Rabbah.
Hoshana Rabbah. The Sukkot is public. The Sukkot belongs to all of civilization, and that's reflected by the 70 sacrifices that are the total number that are brought on Sukkot, reflecting the 70 nations. So my little when it comes to Passover and Sukkot, and of course we're coming up to Passover soon, and there's all this effort to make Passover a universal holiday. It's not that I'm against it. Everyone can celebrate however they want, but I would like to stress that Sukkot actually is the universal holiday, and Passover is the intimate, private, particular holiday. That Passover, while it has a universal message, we've universalized it in the American context. Passover is really about you and your beginning as a people, whereas Sukkot is about you in terms of the whole configuration of the world and all humanity. Passover is your private relationship as a people, and therefore your identity and your own story. But Sukkot is story is not at the center of Sukkot. At the center of Sukkot is the universal experiences of joy and thanksgiving. And therefore, at Sukkot, you should make every effort to invite all sorts of, people, Jews, non-Jews, to your Sukkot. At Passover, that's family, community, family, and the people that are closest to you. Notwithstanding, of course, that in the present configuration of Passover, we obviously open and the present configuration of many, if not half, maybe more than half of Jewish families, which will include non-Jewish members. So, of course, everyone has a place at the table, but at the core of the Passover experience is its particularism. At the core of the Sukkot experience is its universalism. And that's reflected already in the Mishkan. The Mishkan, the sanctuary, is particular, but the temple is universal. And the fact that it is commemorated, is constructed or completed, it's completed in the month I'll say it in anachronistic terms, it's in the Jewish month. Okay, the sanctuary in the Torah is in an Israel month. The temple in Jerusalem on Sukkot is dedicated on a world month, belongs to the world. This is Israel's, this is the world. And so we actually move from one to the other in the calendar. And I think it's done in a very kind of, subtle way that once we crack the code of the calendar, we understand and appreciate, I think, with greater intensity. I'll take some comments or some observations or some rebuttals or whatever if there are any. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
I want to congratulate you. As many other rabbis have done, you completely avoided what the Parsha is about, except for that one point. The Parsha starts with the counting of the wealth
Yes.
put into the temple. It goes to the details of the clothes for the hymn and the ephod and the other stuff.
Right.
And the luxurious material and gems and other stuff that was there. And it ends up then with the construction, like IKEA furniture, and where they go and how they put together. And you're right, you opened up by saying that you could make a model from the specs here.
Yeah, definitely.
And then up by talking about the function of the tabernacle with the cloud over it.
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. You're welcome. I gave you some clarity. Go ahead, Annette. Annette. Oh, sorry.
So, the question is,
Me? Okay.
One
Torah-
second.
So,
One second, Annette. Go ahead, Steve, finish.
why did the Torah go through all these details, which are so boring to the average person?
Oh, so my theory about that is that this is this is information that is encoded in us, and I almost want to say it's song, and I want to say that there's a certain by having such elaborate narration of the sanctuary, where we are populating this building in our imagination, and because of that, we are taking great joy in that. I think that's lost on a modern reader. I think in antiquity, certainly, in a period of exile, and certainly in a period removed from this would be a way of relating with joy all of the details of it. In some ways, it doesn't go far enough. Uh, I want to know how they made stuff. It doesn't tell us how they made, so it just says they made it. They did this. They did this. They did this. And the other point of this is that there is a not so subtle, I think quite overt parallel here to the creation story, that the sanctuary is an attempt to reenact creation, albeit on earth. That is, we are creating a piece of heaven on earth, God's abode, and it's done through 7 stages. And at the end of the 7 stages, it is one. And there's, I think, tremendous joy and satisfaction in that as well. Nanette, go ahead.
so, hey, Rabbi. First of all, I love what Steve, I love what you said.
Good.
But honestly, I mean, it's really a luxury for us to be talking about time in the calendar, because I can't help thinking when the Jews left Egypt, they were slaves. They didn't know about time. When they became when they left slavery, they first learned about time. And also, I can't help thinking about the hostages. I mean, do they even have the idea of time? It's such a, I don't think people really realize time is a luxury.
Well, what you mean when you're saying that is the ability to tell time is a luxury, and that I think that's a great point, which is part of redemption, that is going from and being enslaved to free, is to be master of time. When you are a slave, you are not the master of time. You are subject to someone else's time. As a free person, you're subject to your own time. At least in the Bible, you're subject to God's time. And moving from Pharaoh time to God's time is what redemption is all about. And you're right. I think that the way that people tell time in captivity is one of the way is a way for them to try and gain mastery over their situation. In my other class, we talked about some of the things that are coming out on the hostages. They are not, at the beginning, they weren't aware of what day it was, what time it was, and how they themselves try to keep time. And they early on they talked about you know keeping the pits of dates, and when they would keep them in a secret place in a pocket or whatever, and that way they would know how many days they were, how much time they had spent there, and doing that is a way of controlling their situation. um, and as the few that have been released get interviewed, they talk about what it's like to be in captivity and how endless it is, and how they have to occupy time with things so that they can stay sane. That's, I think, one of the great cruelties of this period. Go ahead, Susie.
On day 50, I think it was when the first group got out. So there was a child among them.
Yeah.
Of course, a child's view of time is different from an adult, but they asked the kid how long he thought he'd been there, and he thought it was 2 years.
Yeah, there you go. Very much. Okay. Anybody else? Anything? All right, then. So we're going to be on for next week. Next week is the 31st. And we'll be starting the book of Vayikra, or maybe not. Maybe we'll do Pesach. We'll see. It's Vayikra takes us into the next book, but also all the different themes of. I'm sure there'll be something to focus on.
Has the Pesach mailing gone out yet?
It did, yes, yes.
Like recently or like
It
last
went
week?
out last week. It went out last week.
I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you all.
Yashikah, Rabbi.
Thank
A
you.
good week to all.
A good week, and see you all.